The day my family discovered I was a stripper started like any other Tuesday. I was counting my tips from the night before when my mother's number flashed across my phone screen. That call changed everything. My name is Violet, and I never planned on taking my clothes off for money. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. I was 22, struggling through my final year of college and drowning in student debt when my roommate Gianna suggested dancing at the Pearl. "Mum, I can explain," I said, my voice trembling as I gripped the phone. "Explain? Explain?" Her voice cracked with rage. "Mrs. Peterson saw you at that disgusting establishment. Do you know what this will do to our family's reputation?" I closed my eyes, feeling my world crumble. Mrs. Peterson, our neighbour whose daughter I used to babysit. Of course she'd run straight to my mother. "I needed the money for school," I said quietly. "The writing programme. The writing programme! That useless degree you insisted on pursuing instead of law school?" She was practically screaming now. "Get home now! Your father needs to hear this directly from you." 2 hours later, I stood in our pristine living room, facing my parents and my brother Andre. Mom sat rigid on her favourite armchair, while Dad paced by the fireplace. Andre leaned against the wall, his expression unreadable. "How long?" Dad's voice was ice cold. "8 months." Mom let out a strangled sob. "8 months of prostituting yourself?" "I'm not a prostitute," I shot back, anger finally breaking through my fear. "I dance. I pay my bills. I maintain a 4.0 GPA. I haven't asked you for a single penny since you cut off my tuition. Because we refused to fund that ridiculous writing degree." Mom sprang to her feet. "We had your life planned out perfectly. Law school, then joining your father's firm. But no, you had to chase some childish dream of becoming an author." Andre finally spoke up. "Mom, maybe we should stay out of this." Both our parents snapped simultaneously. I looked at my brother, seeing the conflict in his eyes. He'd always been the good child, following the path our parents laid out. Now he was a junior partner at Dad's firm, living the life they'd wanted for me. "I'm not ashamed," I said firmly, though my hands were shaking. "I work hard, I'm safe, and I'm paying my own way through school." Dad stopped pacing. "No daughter of mine will be a stripper." The finality in his voice made my blood run cold. "Then I guess I'm not your daughter anymore," I whispered. Mom gasped. "You don't mean that." "No, Mom, you don't mean that. You're the ones making this choice." I turned to face them all. I'm adult enough to make my own decisions, and I'm adult enough to live with the consequences. "Violet," Andre stepped forward, but Dad held up his hand. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back." Dad's words fell like hammer blows. "We will not have this shame in our family." I looked at each of them. Mom's tears, Dad's stone face, Andre's helpless expression. Years of conditional love and impossible expectations crystallized in that moment. "Goodbye then," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. "I hope your reputation was worth it." I walked out of that house with nothing but my car keys and the clothes on my back. Gianna was waiting in her beat-up Honda around the corner. I'd texted her on the way over, knowing I might need an escape plan. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Your room at my place is ready. We'll get through this." That night, curled up on Gianna's spare mattress, I made myself a promise. I would prove them all wrong. I would turn their shame into my success. I would make my childish dream of becoming an author reality. "You okay?" Gianna asked from the doorway. I wiped my eyes and sat up. "No, but I will be. I'm working double shifts at the Pearl this week. I need to make up for the textbooks I left behind." "And you're writing?" "I'm not giving up on that either." I managed a small smile. "Maybe this will give me something real to write about." Gianna nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Good, because the world needs to hear your voice, not their expectations." As I lay back down, I thought about the manuscript hidden on my laptop. A story about a girl breaking free from golden handcuffs. It had felt like fiction when I started it. Now it was my reality. Tomorrow I would dance. I would write. I would survive. And someday, I would thrive. Not despite their rejection, but because of it. They thought they were writing the end of my story. They didn't realize they were only writing the beginning. And that's when the stripper pole broke. I finished my story, and the audience erupted in laughter. The bookstore was packed, standing room only, with readers clutching copies of my latest bestseller, Dancing Through Darkness. 6 years had passed since that Tuesday when my family cast me out. Now, at 28, I was living a life they couldn't have imagined for me, or maybe just couldn't have accepted. Miss Violet, a young woman raised her hand during the Q&A. How much of your success do you attribute to your past experiences? I smiled, remembering the nights at the Pearl that had funded not just my degree, but my first laptop, my first apartment, and the countless writing workshops that shaped my craft. All of it, I answered honestly. Every story needs truth at its core. Mine just happens to have a few sequins and 6-inch heels mixed in. After the signing, Caden, my publisher, pulled me aside. Your numbers are through the roof. The authenticity resonates with readers. They can tell you've lived these stories. Speaking of stories, Gianna interrupted, waving her phone, you need to see this. She handed me her phone, open to a local news article. The headline made my heart stop. Murray and Associates law firm faces bankruptcy amid investment scandal. Your father's firm, Gianna said softly. Apparently they made some bad investments. Really bad. I skimmed the article, my throat tightening. The firm where my father had worked for 30 years, where Andre was now a partner, was crumbling. The family's assets were being liquidated to cover the losses. There's more. Gianna swiped to another article. Your childhood home is going on the market. The elegant Victorian house that had been my prison and paradise appeared on the screen. The same house I'd been banished from all those years ago. Violet? Caden's voice snapped me back to reality. Your car's here. We need to head to the TV interview. Right. I handed the phone back to Gianna. Thanks for showing me. In the car, Caden reviewed my talking points for the interview, but my mind kept drifting to that house. To the window seat where I'd written my first stories. To the garden where Mom had taught me about roses before appearances became more important than affection. Earth to Violet. Caden waved his hand in front of my face. You okay? The house I grew up in is for sale, I blurted out. My family's broke. Caden's eyebrows shot up. The same family that kicked me out? Yeah. I laughed, but it sounded hollow. Karma's a funny thing, isn't it? What are you thinking? I'm thinking. I paused, an idea taking shape. I'm thinking I should buy it. The house? Caden stared at me. Are you sure that's wise? My phone buzzed. A text from Andre, the first in years. I guess you heard. Mom and Dad don't know what to do. They're too proud to ask for help. Of course they are, I muttered. Violet? Caden's voice was gentle. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. You're already doing that. I turned to him. But what if this isn't about revenge? What if it's about closing a circle? Then make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. He checked his watch. We're here, ready to dazzle them. The interview went smoothly. I'd gotten good at telling my story without revealing too much. Afterward, in my apartment, I called Gianna. I need a favor, I said as soon as she answered. Can you find out who's handling the house sale? Already did, she replied. It's Mark Joseph from Premier Realty. Want his number? I grabbed a pen. You know me too well. Vi, her voice turned serious. Are you sure about this? Last time you were in that house? Last time I was in that house, I was powerless, I cut in. This time would be different. Because you'd own it. Because I've owned my story since then. I looked at the wall of my office where my first dollar from the Pearl hung next to my first published article. They wanted to write my ending. Maybe it's time I showed them who really holds the pen. Just be careful, Gianna sighed. I remember picking up the pieces last time. I'm not that broken girl anymore, I said softly. I'm not looking for their approval. I'm looking for closure. Something like that. I wrote down Mark's number. Besides, wouldn't it be poetic? The stripper daughter buying the family estate? Gianna laughed. When you put it that way, it does have a certain dramatic flair. Very on brand for a best-selling author. After we hung up, I stood at my window, looking out at the city lights. The same lights that had seemed so threatening when I first started dancing now felt like old friends. I'd made my peace with my past. Maybe it was time to make peace with my future. I picked up my phone and dialed Mark's number. It was time to go home, on my terms this time. The asking price is $8.50, Mark said, leading me through the familiar front door. But given the market and their urgency to sell, we might negotiate that down. Walking into my childhood home felt like stepping into a time capsule. The same crystal chandelier hung in the foyer, though its sparkle had dimmed. Mum's precious Persian rug still covered the hardwood floors, but they were worn thin in places. The current owners have lived here for 30 years, Mark continued, not knowing he was talking about my parents. They've maintained it well, but some updates would be needed. I ran my hand along the banister, remembering how I used to slide down it when no one was watching. Tell me about these owners. Mark shuffled through his papers. Lovely couple, really. Bit proud, though. The husband's law firm hit some trouble and they're downsizing. Shame, really. They raise their children here. Children? I kept my voice neutral. 2, I believe. A son who's still in the area and a daughter who... He checked his notes. Who moved away some years ago. I bit back a bitter laugh. Moved away. That was one way to put it. The library, I said, moving down the hallway without waiting for his direction. I'd like to see it. Mark hurried after me. Oh, you know the layout? I've seen the listing photos. The library doors were closed. I hesitated for a moment before pushing them open. The smell of old books and leather hit me immediately. Dad's collection still lined the walls, each leather-bound volume perfectly aligned. This was where he'd announced my law school acceptance, an acceptance I never used. Beautiful space, Mark commented. Perfect for a home office. Or for writing, I murmured. The owners are hoping for a quick sale, Mark said, checking his phone. They need to be out within 60 days. I walked to the window seat, my old reading nook. The cushions were faded, but I could still see the small ink stain where I'd spilled my pen, writing my first short story. I'll take it, I said suddenly. Mark blinked. Don't you want to see the rest of the house? No need. I turned to face him. I'll pay asking price, all cash. But I have conditions. He pulled out a notepad, looking both surprised and pleased. Of course. First, my identity stays completely confidential until closing. Use my corporation name, Rising Phoenix Publishing, for all paperwork. He nodded, scribbling. Second, I want to close as quickly as possible, 30 days max. That shouldn't be a problem with a cash offer. And third, I took a deep breath, I want to be present when you tell them about the offer, in person. Mark frowned. That's unusual. Typically, the buyers and sellers don't meet until closing, if at all. It's non-negotiable. I met his eyes. Those are my terms. I'll need to check with the sellers, but given the offer terms, I don't foresee any objections. Back in my car, I called Gianna. Well? She answered on the first ring. I did it. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I'm buying the house. Holy shit. She paused. How did it feel being back there? Like walking through a museum of my past mistakes. And theirs. I started the engine. Mark's setting up a meeting to present the offer. In person. Vi. Gianna's voice held a warning. Are you sure you want to do it this way? They need to see me. Need to know that the daughter they threw away isn't just surviving. She's thriving enough to buy their house out from under them. That sounds a lot like revenge. Maybe it is. I pulled out of the driveway, looking at the house in my rearview mirror. But maybe they need to face what they did. Really face it. And what about Andre? Have you told him? I sighed. Not yet, but he'll find out soon enough. That evening, I sat in my apartment, staring at the formal offer papers Mark had emailed. My cursor hovered over the signature line. One click, and I'd set in motion something that couldn't be undone. My phone buzzed. Another text from Andre. Mom's not eating. Dad's not sleeping. I don't know how to help them. I typed back. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Then I signed the offer and hit send. Minutes later, Mark called. They want to meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. The sellers are eager to discuss the offer. I smiled, imagining my parents' relief at finding a quick buyer. They had no idea that their salvation would come from the very person they'd condemned. Perfect, I said. I'll be there. After hanging up, I walked to my closet and pulled out a garment bag. Inside was a designer suit I'd bought for my last book tour. Elegant, expensive, powerful. Not a sequin in sight. Tomorrow I would walk back into that house not as the shameful daughter they'd cast out, but as the successful woman I'd become. And this time, I'd be the one holding all the cards. I just hoped I was ready for what would happen when those cards hit the table. You're pacing, Gianna said, watching me from my couch. It was 1 p.m., an hour before the meeting. You're going to wear a hole in that expensive floor. I can't help it. I stopped in front of my full-length mirror, adjusting my blazer for the 100th time. What if I'm making a huge mistake? Then it's your mistake to make. She stood up and straightened my collar. But you look like $1 million. Or more accurately, $850,000. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Sellers confirmed. Meeting in their library. The library? I muttered. Of course it would be the library. Poetic, isn't it? Gianna smiled. Where your dad crushed your dreams of being a writer, you'll now sign the papers that make his house yours. When you put it that way, it sounds terrible. No, she squeezed my shoulder. It sounds like karma. The drive to my childhood home felt surreal. I parked a block away, not wanting my parents to see my car. Mark was waiting at the corner. Ready? He asked, briefcase in hand. One thing first, I said. When we go in, let me do the revealing. Please. He nodded, though confusion crossed his face. Your money. Your show. We walked up the familiar path to the front door. Each step felt heavier than the last. Mark rang the doorbell, and my heart nearly stopped when my mother opened the door. She looked older, tired. Her perfectly coiffed hair now showed streaks of grey. She didn't recognize me at first. I was hidden behind Mark, and 6 years had changed me considerably. Please, come in, she said, her voice carrying that same artificial politeness I remembered. Lawrence is waiting in the library. I kept my head down as we followed her, my heels clicking on the hardwood floors. The sound echoed through the house like a countdown. Dad sat in his leather armchair, looking smaller than I remembered. Andre stood by the window, my old reading spot. His eyes widened when he saw me, but he quickly schooled his expression. Thank you for meeting on such short notice, Mark began, setting his briefcase on the coffee table. As discussed, I have a buyer who's prepared to meet your asking price, all cash, with a 30-day closing. Mum sat straighter. That's wonderful news. The buyer has requested to be present for this meeting, Mark continued, glancing at me. I stepped forward, finally lifting my head. Hello, Mom. Dad? The silence that followed was deafening. Mum's hand flew to her throat. Dad's face drained of colour. Andre looked like he might be sick. Violet? Mum whispered. Surprise, I said softly, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm your buyer. Dad stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. This is some kind of joke. No joke. I nodded to Mark, who began laying out the paperwork. Rising Phoenix Publishing, my company, is prepared to buy this house. Full asking price, no conditions except the quick closing. You? Mum's voice cracked. You have that kind of money? Turns out writing wasn't such a useless dream after all. I met her eyes. My 4th book just hit the bestseller list. The advance for the 5th could buy this house twice over. Andre cleared his throat. You knew about this? He asked Mark. Mark looked uncomfortable. I only learned the buyer's identity yesterday. The offer is legitimate, I can assure you. We won't sell to her, Dad declared. You can't afford not to, I countered. Your firm is bankrupt. Your assets are frozen. This house goes to auction in 60 days if you don't sell. Do you really want the neighbourhood watching that spectacle? Mom flinched at the word spectacle. Always worried about appearances even now. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because I can. I walked to the window seat, running my hand along the faded cushion. Because the daughter you threw away for being a stripper is now successful enough to buy your house. Ironic, isn't it? If this is about revenge, Dad started, it's about coming full circle. I cut him off. You made your choice 6 years ago. Now, I'm making mine. Andre stepped forward. Vi, please. The papers are ready, Mark interrupted, clearly wanting to move things along. Shall we proceed? Mom looked at Dad, tears in her eyes. He stared at the floor, his jaw clenched. Finally, he nodded. We'll sign, he said quietly. As Mark guided them through the paperwork, I stood by the bookshelf, examining the leather-bound law books my father had once hoped I'd study. Behind me, I heard the scratch of pens on paper, my mother's muffled sniffles, the rustle of pages being turned. It's done, Mark announced finally. We'll schedule the closing for 30 days from today. I turned back to my family, my broken, proud family. I'll have my lawyers contact you about the transition details. As I walked out of the library, Andre caught up with me in the hallway. Was it worth it? He asked softly. I looked back at our parents, still sitting shell-shocked among the signed papers. Ask me in 30 days. The front door closed behind me with a familiar click. But this time, I was the one choosing to walk away. 30 days passed in a blur of legal paperwork and silent tension. Now I stood in the closing attorney's office, watching my parents shuffle in, looking like they'd aged another decade since our last meeting. The funds have been verified, the attorney announced, spreading documents across his mahogany desk. We just need final signatures from all parties. Mom wouldn't look at me. Dad stared straight ahead, his jaw set in that familiar stubborn line. Andre had chosen not to attend. He'd texted me earlier. I can't watch this. Before we sign, I said, making everyone pause, I have something to say. Mom finally lifted her eyes to meet mine. The defeat in them almost made me falter. Almost. 6 years ago, you gave me an ultimatum in this city. Strip or stay. Dance or daughter. Not both. I pulled a folder from my briefcase. I'd like to show you what that choice led to. I laid out magazine covers featuring my books, newspaper articles about my success, photos of my speaking engagements at universities. While you were busy being ashamed of me, I was busy building something. Violet, Dad's voice carried a warning tone I remembered from childhood. This isn't necessary. Oh, but it is. I pulled out one final piece of paper, my first paycheck stub from the Pearl. This paid for my textbooks after you cut me off, $342. I framed the original. Mom made a small choking sound. Every dollar I earned on that stage went toward my future. Every judgment, every whisper, every condemning look, I turned them all into fuel. I met their eyes in turn. And now here we are. Poetic, isn't it? The attorney cleared his throat uncomfortably. Shall we proceed with the signatures? In a moment, I said, pulling out one more document. This is my offer to let you stay in the house. Dad's head snapped up. Mom gasped. What? She whispered. A rental agreement, market rate, month-to-month lease. I slid it across the desk. Your choice. Dad's hands trembled as he picked up the paper. Why would you? Because I'm not you, I said simply. I don't believe in destroying people to prove a point. Mom started crying quietly. Dad put down the rental agreement and finally, really looked at me. We were wrong, he said, his voice rough. About everything. Yes, you were. I kept my voice steady. But this isn't about revenge. It's about showing you who I really am, who I've always been if you'd bothered to look. The stripper who became a best-selling author, Mom said softly, surprising me. I've read your books. All of them. I hadn't expected that. You have? She nodded, wiping her eyes. The character in your second book, the mother who couldn't see past her own expectations, that was me, wasn't it? It was every parent who values appearance over authenticity. I swallowed hard. Every mother who confuses control with love. The attorney shuffled papers nervously. The rental agreement would need to be handled separately from the sale. Then let's finish the sale first, I said, picking up a pen. Mom? Dad? Your signatures will transfer ownership to me. The rental agreement is there if you want it. Your choice. For once, I'm giving you the ultimatum. Dad looked at Mom, then back at me. We don't deserve your mercy. No, I agreed. But maybe that's exactly why I'm offering it. The next few minutes passed in a blur of signatures and initials. With each stroke of the pen, years of pain and pride transferred hands, sealed in legal language and notary stamps. Congratulations, the attorney said when we finished. The property is now officially owned by Rising Phoenix Publishing. I stood, gathering my things. The rental agreement is good for 48 hours. Let me know your decision. As I turned to leave, Mom called out, Violet? I paused at the door. That night, when you left, her voice cracked. I wanted to run after you. Why didn't you? Pride. She looked down at her hands. Always pride. Pride is expensive, I said quietly. I learned that at the Pearl. Every night I danced, I left my pride in the dressing room, but I kept my dignity. There's a difference. Dad stood up. We'd like to sign the rental agreement, if the offer still stands. I nodded to the attorney. Draw up the papers. As I walked out of the office, my phone buzzed. A text from Andre. How did it go? I typed back. They're staying, as my tenants. His response came quickly. You're a better person than they deserved. No, I replied. I'm exactly the person they failed to see. I got into my car and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. The scared girl who'd walked out of that house 6 years ago was gone. In her place sat a woman who'd learned that the best revenge isn't serving cold justice. It's serving grace when they expect wrath. The house was mine now, but more importantly, so was my story. A week after the closing, I sat across from my parents at their favorite restaurant. Now my treat. The silence between us felt heavy with unspoken words and years of distance. The firm's liquidation is final, Dad said, breaking the tension. 28 years of building it, gone in months. What happened? I asked, genuinely curious. He sighed, looking older than his years. Bad investments. Trust in the wrong people. Pride preventing me from seeing the warning signs until it was too late. Sounds familiar, I said quietly. Mom flinched. She hadn't touched her wine. We've been doing a lot of thinking, Violet, about everything. That makes two of us. I took a sip of my water. Andre tells me you've read my books. The scene in your third book, Dad leaned forward, where the father throws away his daughter's dance shoes. That was about me, wasn't it? Everything I write is about us in some way. I met his gaze. Writers turn their pain into prose. It's how we survive. A waiter arrived with our food, providing a brief respite from the intensity of the conversation. Tell us, Mom said after he left, about those years. The real story. I put down my fork. Are you sure you want to hear it? They both nodded. After you kicked me out, I lived with Gianna, worked double shifts at the Pearl, took morning classes, wrote until dawn. I smiled slightly. The other dancers helped me study. Did you know that? They quizzed me on literature between sets. Mom's hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. I graduated summa cum laude, got published in literary magazines. An agent found me. Then Caden, my publisher, took a chance on my first book. I paused. The advance was enough to quit dancing, but I kept my first pair of platform heels as a reminder. A reminder of what? Dad asked. That sometimes the path to dignity runs through places others consider shameful. The silence that followed felt different, less hostile, more contemplative. Your brother, Mom started, then stopped. What about him? He defended you. That night, after you left, said we were making a terrible mistake. She dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. He was right. Andre's always been smarter than people give him credit for. I smiled sadly. He used to sneak into my shows, you know. Not to watch, to make sure I was safe. Left before I ever saw him. Dad put down his fork hard. He knew where you were, all that time? He was being a better father than you were, I said sharply, then softer. He was protecting his little sister. Like we should have done, Mom whispered. A couple walked past our table and Mom instinctively straightened, putting on her social mask. Some habits die hard. You don't have to pretend anymore, I said. The neighbours all know about the bankruptcy, about selling the house, about everything. Old habits, she murmured. Speaking of the house, Dad cleared his throat, the rental agreement is just business, I finished for him. I'm your landlord, not your saviour. We know. He looked down at his plate. But it's more than we deserve. Maybe. I leaned back. Or maybe it's exactly what we all deserve, a chance to rewrite our story. How can you be so forgiving? Mom asked. I'm not. I met her eyes. I'm being strategic. Success isn't about destroying those who hurt you. It's about building something so magnificent that their rejection becomes irrelevant. The waiter returned with the check. I reached for it before Dad could try. Let me, he protested weakly. You can't afford it, I said, not unkindly. Besides, this is what successful authors do. They treat their parents to dinner. As we walked to our cars, Mom suddenly stopped. Would you sign my copies of your books? I brought them. They're in the car. I watched her retrieve a canvas bag full of hardcovers. All my books, their spines cracked from reading. You really did read them, I said, surprised. Over and over. She handed me a pen. They were the only way I could hear your voice. I opened the first book, thinking carefully before writing. To Mom. Sometimes the hardest stories to read are the ones we're part of. Love. Violet. She read it, tears spilling onto the page. Dad looked over her shoulder, his arm around her for the first time in years. The house, he said suddenly, will be out by the end of the month. What? I looked up from signing the last book. But the rental agreement is generous, Mom finished. But we need to find our own way now, like you did. I handed back the books, understanding. They needed to rebuild, just as I had. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. Okay, I said simply. But dinner, same time next week? They both nodded, and for the first time in 6 years, their smiles reached their eyes. Moving day arrived with a crisp autumn breeze. I stood in the driveway, watching my parents load the last of their belongings into a rented moving truck. They'd found a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, but it was a start. Need any help? I asked, approaching the truck. Dad wiped his forehead. I think we've got it. Though I never realized how much stuff we'd accumulated over 30 years. The furniture stays, right? I gestured toward the house. As we agreed? Yes. Mom emerged from the garage carrying a box labelled Photos. Though I'd like to show you something before we leave. She led me up to my old bedroom, now empty except for the built-in window seat. Kneeling down, she pressed a hidden latch, and a small compartment popped open. I kept these, she said, pulling out a stack of papers. Every article you published, every review, even the ones under your pen name, before you started using your real name. I took the yellowed clippings with trembling hands. You followed my career. Even then. Of course I did. She touched my arm hesitantly. I was wrong, Violet. So terribly wrong, but I never stopped being your mother. A car door slammed outside and Andre's voice carried up. Mom? Dad? The truck's ready. We headed downstairs to find Andre and Dad securing the last few boxes. This is it then, Dad said, looking around the foyer one last time. His eyes lingered on the chandelier, now sparkling again after I'd had it cleaned. It's just a house, I said softly. No, Mom shook her head. It was our prison. We were so caught up in appearances, in what the neighbours would think, in maintaining this facade. We lost sight of what really mattered. Andre stepped forward. Speaking of what matters, I have news. We all turned to him. I'm leaving the law, he announced, opening a community arts centre downtown, using my savings and some investors I found. Dad's mouth fell open. But your career was your dream, Dad. Not mine. Andre smiled. Violet taught me that sometimes you have to disappoint your parents to become who you're meant to be. I couldn't help but laugh. An arts centre? Really? Really? He grinned. And I want you to be our first guest speaker. Show those kids that their dreams matter no matter what anyone says. Mum started crying again, but this time they were different tears. We really messed up with both of you, didn't we? You did your best, Andre said, hugging her, with what you knew then. But now we all know better. Dad cleared his throat. The truck's waiting. We should... Wait, I said suddenly. I have something for you. I ran to my car and returned with a manuscript. My new book. It's not published yet, but I want you to read it first. Mom took it carefully. What's it about? Forgiveness, I said, and how sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself. Dad read the title aloud. Dancing with Ghosts, a story of family, forgiveness, and finding your way home. It's your story too, I said. All of ours. The moments stretched between us heavy with understanding. Then Andre's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. The rental office closes in an hour, he reminded them. We need to get your keys. One by one, they hugged me. Mom held on the longest. We'll see you for dinner next week? She asked. Same time, same place, I promised. I watched them drive away. Dad at the wheel of the moving truck, Mom in the passenger seat, Andre following in his car. When they turned the corner, I walked back into the house. My house. The emptiness felt different now, not hollow but full of possibility. I walked through each room, touching walls that held 3 decades of memories, both painful and precious. In the library, I found a note propped against Dad's prized law books. These belong to you now, not because I want you to be a lawyer, but because you've proven you can win any case life brings you. Love, Dad. In my old bedroom, another note tucked into the window seat. I saved your first story, the one about the girl who could fly. I should have known then that no cage could hold you. Love, Mom. And in the kitchen, one from Andre. Remember when you taught me to make pancakes at midnight? Let's do that again sometime. This time I'm buying the syrup. Love, your proud big brother. I sat on the stairs holding all 3 notes and felt the last pieces of anger melt away. The house that had once witnessed my shame now stood as testament to something else. The power of owning your story, all of it, the glitter and the grit, the darkness and the dawn. My phone buzzed. A text from Gianna. You okay? I looked around at my new home, at the space that would hold my next chapter, and typed back, better than okay. I'm free. The grand opening of Andre's Arts Centre buzzed with energy. Local news cameras rolled as I stepped up to the podium, facing a room full of young dreamers and their parents. When I was 16, I began. I wrote my first story in a window seat, hiding from parents who thought art was a waste of time. Today, I own that window seat, and that house, and my story. In the front row, Mom and Dad sat holding hands. They looked different now, softer, more real. Dad had traded his suits for casual wear, and Mom had finally let her hair go naturally grey. Society loves to tell us who we should be, I continued. Parents, teachers, neighbours, everyone has an opinion about your path. But here's the truth. The only path that matters is the one you carve for yourself. I pulled out my old platform heels from behind the podium. Gasps and whispers rippled through the audience. These paid for my degree. Every dance, every dollar, every judgment I endured, they all led me here. To this moment, to this truth, there is no shame in surviving. There is only pride in thriving. Andre stood at the back, beaming. His arts centre had transformed an abandoned warehouse into a haven of creativity. Dance studios, writing workshops, painting classes, a place where dreams didn't need permission to exist. My brother and I learned the hard way that disappointing your parents might be the price of becoming yourself. I smiled at Andre. But sometimes, if you're lucky, they learn to see you. Really see you. After the speech during the reception, a teenage girl approached me clutching my latest book. "My parents hate that I dance," she whispered. "They say it's inappropriate." I knelt down to her level. "What do you say?" "That when I dance, I feel like I'm flying." "Then fly," I said, signing her book. "The ground will always be there to catch you." Her mother appeared, looking uncomfortable. I stood to face her. "She has real talent," I said before she could speak, "and a stronger spirit than you know." The woman glanced at my book, then at her daughter. Perhaps we could talk about proper training." Andre materialized beside me. "We have an excellent dance program here. Scholarships available." As they walked away to discuss details, Mom touched my arm. "That was you," she said softly. "At her age, we just couldn't see it then." "But you see it now," I replied. "In her. In others." Dad joined us carrying coffee. The contractor called. "Your renovations are finished." I nodded. I'd transformed my childhood home into a writer's retreat, keeping one room as a permanent office for myself. The window seat remained untouched, a reminder of where stories begin. "Speaking of renovations," Andre called out, waving us over to a wall, "I have something to show you." He pulled down a cloth covering, revealing a mural. It showed a young girl writing at a window seat, while behind her a dancer twirled in shadows. Both figures had my face. "The duality of Violet," he said proudly. "Writer and dancer, daughter and rebel. Living proof that we contain multitudes." Mum started to cry, but Dad surprised us all by laughing. "All those years trying to make you two fit into neat little boxes." He shook his head. "Look what happened when we let you out." Gianna arrived, fashionably late as usual. "Sorry I missed the speech, but I brought champagne." We gathered in Andre's office, popping the cork and filling plastic cups. The sunset painted the room gold through the industrial windows. "A toast," Andre raised his cup, "to second chances." "To found family," Gianna added, squeezing my hand. "To forgiveness," Mom said quietly. "To truth," Dad offered. I lifted my cup last. "To owning your story, every chapter, every verse, every dance." As conversations flowed around me, I watched the teenage dancer from earlier practicing in one of the studios. Her mother sat watching, uncertainty warring with pride on her face. I touched the necklace I wore, a small silver key on a chain. It opened both the art center and my house, linking my past and future in tangible ways. Andre sidled up beside me. "Happy?" "Content," I corrected. "It's better than happy." "The mural?" He hesitated. "Was it too much?" "It's perfect." I hugged him. "Thank you for seeing both sides of me even when I couldn't." Through the window, I could see the city lights beginning to twinkle. Somewhere out there, a girl was probably dancing for dollars, funding her own dreams. Another was probably writing in secret, finding her voice. I touched the window glass, speaking softly to those unknown dreamers. "Keep going. Your story matters." Behind me, my family, both blood and chosen, continued celebrating. Their voices blended into a melody of reconciliation and hope, proving that sometimes the happiest endings aren't endings at all. They're just better beginnings.